This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Parashat Pinchas. First, we'd like to thank Torah Anytime for doing so many beautiful things online on the programs, and for the people here and for the people that are watching abroad. I want to mention a story that happened about 100 years ago, at the times of Moshe Feinstein, when he was a rabbi, not here in America, but out in Russia. He was a rabbi of a city, and in the city there was an individual that wasn't one of those observant, good, proper Jews. He would report a lot of the events that were against the government, so to speak. He would go to the people in charge, to the officials, and he would tell them, the Jews are doing this and this. Is this legal? Is this illegal? He would report on individuals, and he would cause a lot of problems to the Jewish community. He himself was a Jew, but he wanted to show his loyalty, his patriotism to the government, so he would say a lot of the different things that he didn't find appropriate. And the Jews had, of course, the community had numerous problems with this individual. But after many years, the man passed away. And before he passed away, he wrote a letter to the Rabbanim and to the community. It was an open letter where he says, I feel really, really guilty. I feel so bad for causing so much stress and anguish and putting people in jail, locking people up, causing people to be fined. I feel terrible. But all the different things I did, and I want to amend. I want to do tshuva. I regret it. And I feel that the best tshuva that I could do is, if you were to permit me, I request upon my death wish, is that I should not be buried with the rest of the Jews with a proper, honorable burial. Rather, keep me away from the rest of everybody else, away from the cemetery, and bury me kivirat chamor, which means like the burial of a donkey, without honor, in a disgraceful fashion, in a way that would be considered a degradation according to all the opinions. And that way, this will atone for my sins. As we know, a person who doesn't get buried with honor or with dignity, it's a kapara, an atonement for his averot. So this is the letter he sent, open letter for the leaders of the community. And the Chevra Kadisha received this letter. Of course, they're not going to act. The Chevra Kadisha is in charge of the burial affairs. They're not going to act without the consent of the leaders and the Rabbanim. And they took this letter to Moshe Feinstein. And they said to him, this man has asked us, he wanted of us to go ahead and to bury him in a disgraceful fashion. He feels really bad for what he did. He wants to do tshuva. What's the halacha in this circumstance? So Moshe Feinstein told them, the psak halacha, the ruling, is that a person is not the owners of his physical body. The body belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It doesn't belong to the individual. And therefore, he has no right to claim what we should do. We have to follow the halakha, and according to halakha, you have to bury him like you bury everybody else. Honorable, the way a person is supposed to be buried. The Chevra Kadisha persisted. They said, but this is, in a certain sense, that's going to be more cruel. Let's have a little bit of mercy on him. Let's give him the burial that he asked for. This is his final wish. And then he'll have atonement for his averot. Maybe we should conduct ourselves in that fashion. Moshe Feinstein said, look, my responsibility, your responsibility, everybody's responsibility is to make sure we follow halakha. We have no responsibility to follow what this person wanted us to do, but what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want us to do that. He wants us to bury him like the halakha, and if it's a question of his sins will be atoned, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has din shamayim. He'll take care of the atonement of the sins. That's the responsibility of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They followed, of course, if the Rav tells them to do, they do. They followed the words of Moshe Feinstein, and they went ahead. They buried him just like everybody else. A few days passed, and the guard, who was the shomer of the cemetery, saw some officials, some policemen coming to the cemetery and looking for the grave of Pironi Almoni that passed away, this individual, this Moser that passed away. They were looking for his grave. And he showed it to them. He's going to show them. And they opened up the grave. He was shocked, but they opened it up and they checked it out. They looked. They took some notes. They closed it. That was it. They left. And the shomer was like, wait, what just happened? They said, well, we received a complaint from this person before he died. He said, look, I know my brothers, the Jews, they hate me because I was loyal to the government. And I am very afraid, I'm worried that they're not going to bury me properly like they bury everybody else. Make sure to go ahead and investigate this matter further. And we took his complaint seriously, and we knew that there was resentment and animosity towards him, and we looked and we saw that it was a false alarm. Everything was done properly. You see, this Rasha, this evil person, even in his last days of his life, he was seeking and plotting how he could cause the Jewish community to have problems with the government. But Rav Moshe Feinstein, with his greatness, with his Torah, the man who was in charge, the watchman, reported this back to the officials. Now, he didn't know about the whole thing. They asked Rav Moshe Feinstein, they didn't ask him. He didn't know, he just kind of reported what happened. And they said, now we understand how important it is to listen to our leaders, to listen to Rav Moshe Feinstein. And even when something seems kind of cruel, we're not going to give him atonement, but if that's the halakha, we follow it. And look, Baruch Hashem, we were saved as a result of this halakha. That's a story, true story, that depicts to us that when you go in the ways of the Torah, you go in the ways of the Chachamim, you never end up losing out. This story, one version or another, we hear in different forms, in different ways, different depictions, that comes out at the end of the day, you will never lose out when you worship HaKadosh Baruch Hu the right way, when you follow halakha correctly. And of course, it's 100% true. We hear these stories a lot, but sometimes it feeds into a narrative that is a very dangerous narrative. And I think that people could go maybe 40, 50 years hearing drashot, hearing shiurim, reading sfarim of the Torah, and learning lessons, but maybe over the course of those 50 years, fail to learn an extremely important lesson and never come in contact with a different message and an important message that we live with every single day with our lives. But sometimes we don't pick up on a sensitive and a delicate message that we have here. And it's connected to this week's Parashat. Parashat tells us, of course, the very beginning of Parashat Pinchas relays to us what happened. We know last week, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, he sees a terrible injustice happening, people dying on the streets left and right from a plague. He sees that there is immorality in Am Yisrael, and it starts from the top. Zimri ben Salu, the leader of Shevet Shimon, and he is not afraid, with all the risks and all the dangers that are involved in him going and committing the action that he did, taking that step to put his life on the line. He manages to save Am Yisrael single-handedly. He saved the nation, the entire nation of Am Yisrael, because if he wouldn't have done what he did, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have continued to bring the plague. And it wouldn't have been 24,000 that died, it would have been far more of those people that passed away. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this week's parasha says, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, Heshiv et chamatim al bnei Yisrael, he caused me to feel much better about the situation and caused the stop of the plague. And therefore I command you, Moshe Rabbeinu, that you should go and you should inform Pinchas that I am now giving him Beriti Shalom, the covenant of peace. And Rashi explains, what does it mean? Hineni noten lo et Beriti Shalom. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is brought down in the Midrash, Bedin hu she'ito scharo. It is through the law. It is just that he should receive his reward. Lekach emor, therefore tell him that I am going to bring him Berit Shalom, this covenant of peace. Now, if you look at the Osameach and other commentaries as well, they have a great difficulty with this. Bedinhu, what does it mean bedinhu? Logical, it's just. Midat hadin, bedin means the character of judgment. Judgment dictates that Pinchas deserves reward. Now really? Is that really the halakha? Oh, I know of a Gemara in Masechet Kiddushin that tells us otherwise. You know, in Acher, one of the things that caused Acher, Elisha ben Avuya, who was a great man in Torah, a great man in a spiritual sense, in a knowledgeable sense, he saw something that bothered him so much, it caused him, at the pinnacle of greatness, to leave the Torah and to become the worst of the worst. The Gemara says, what did Acher see? He saw a son that the father was standing next to him, and the father commands him to go climb on top of a tree and to take the eggs and to shoo away the mother bird, to perform the mitzvah shiru haken, perform the mitzvah, sending the mother bird away, which is a mitzvah brought down in the Torah, and the mitzvah of honoring his father. 2 mitzvot, the only 2 mitzvot that it mentions about them, leman yitav lecha uleman yarichun yamecha, where the Torah tells us that your days will be lengthened. And these 2 mitzvot put together, the son climbs on top of the tree, falls down and dies. And Acher sees this and he says, how does this fit with the pasuk that says that your life is going to be lengthened? And here he is performing these mitzvot and he ends up dying. It's not possible, and he leaves the Torah. It cannot be true, and therefore he left the entirety of the Torah. Everybody all right? He left the entirety of the Torah as a result of that. The Gemara says, if Acher would have known the drasha of Rabbi Yaakov, he would have never left. Rabbi Yaakov explains, Schar mitzvah behai almaleka. There is no reward for mitzvot in this world. And when the Torah says, Leman yarichun yamecha, that your days will be lengthened, it is not in reference to this world. It's a reference to the next world, into Olam Haba. And how that's supposed to be understood is a whole different question. But it does not refer to this world. And Rabbi Yaakov says this, and Acher did not know this, he failed to realize this point. But it comes out, the Gemara is very clear in Masechet Kiddushin, that there is no reward for mitzvot in this world. Yet here comes Parashat Pinchas and tells us, the Rashi, the Midrash, that Pinchas deserved to be rewarded. Bidinhu. Not just midat harachamim, not just the character trait of HaKadosh Baruch Hu of mercy, but even the judgment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Pinchas merits to receive reward. How do you explain this? How do you reconcile this with the Gemara? The commentaries are bothered by this. The Khatam Sofer addresses it, and the Meshech Chochmah addresses it. But we want to leave that question to the side for a moment and get into an added element over here. And one of the things that I think we hear often, a very recurring theme in the Torah mitzvot, like the story we mentioned with Moshe Feinstein, that you don't lose out from performing mitzvot. You end up, the end of the day, if you sacrifice for the Torah, if you make sure that you go ahead and you keep the Shabbat, you're going to end up getting a lot more business. And you're going to have, and you make sure you sacrifice. And we hear recurring stories, how a person could have come to the minyan and he could have had something else pulling him away and he would have made a lot more money, but he decided to come to Beit HaKnesset, and lo and behold, instead of losing out, he ended up finding a treasure and making hundreds and thousands of dollars. We hear a lot of these types of events, that how at the end of the day, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made sure that everything would work out at the end. And there's, of course, a lot of truth to those stories, but it relays a message that is a very dangerous message that we have to make sure that we carefully understand and implement. See, today we like happy endings. This is the generation of the happy endings. We got a lot of Disneyland out there, Disney movies. So you got the happy ending. Everything looks bad, and at the end, everything works out. We want everything to be a happy ending. But let me mention to you a small story that the Mishnah Berurah in Ilchot Tefillah brings down. And here it is. I'll read it inside. Hagaon Moreno Arav Zalman Merilish was the Av Bet Din, the chief rabbi of the Keilah Kedosha, of the congregation of Hamburg. And he one time walked to Beit HaKnesset. And he was wearing talit tefillin as he was going to Beit HaKnesset. Upaga bo adam echad, and there was a man who encountered him, sheratza limkor lo, that wanted to sell him a very precious avanim tovot bezol, an unbelievable deal that he will never have access to. It was these precious diamonds. He needed to get it off, and he needed to sell it for really, really cheap. He found this Rav, the Av Beit Din. He says, I'm willing to sell it to you for a quarter of its value. But I don't have him with me. I need you to come to my house. And we can go ahead and finish off the deal. I need the money right away, or else it's not going to happen. The Rav says to him, look, I'm on my way to Shacharit right now. I can't go ahead and do this deal. I have to wait. I can't do it. Wait for me until I finish the tefillah. I'll go home. I'll bring the money, and it's yours, and then I'll be able to buy it from you. Deal of a lifetime. He says, look, it's a deal of a lifetime. Fine. I'll do it after the tefillah. He prays. Sure enough, tefillah, from the beginning to the end, calmly, relaxed, goes back home, gets the money. By the time he comes to the person's home, says the Chafetz Chaim, B'toch kach macharan hala le'acher. In the meantime, this merchant already sold those diamonds to somebody else. It was a hot deal. You didn't pick it up. That's it. I already sold it. Sorry, too late. And this person ended up losing hundreds and thousands of rubles because he knew the calculation. The other guy, he knew who he was. Guy sold it, made a ton of money off of it, and he could have been the one to make the money, and now he lost out. Now, how do you explain this story? If everything is supposed to work out at the end, now you go ahead and you worked and you made sure you came to tefillah, you were committed to the Beit HaKnesset, and lo and behold, it didn't work out at the end. It didn't. You didn't get the money that you wanted. We've heard stories the other way, where the guy goes and he makes sure, nothing's going to get me to stop from coming to Beit HaKnesset. He goes to Beit HaKnesset and somehow he makes double the money. That we've heard. The happy endings we hear. But what about when the story doesn't end up that way? And the truth of the matter is, there is something that we fail to realize. That is not the truth of the matter. It's not that when I go ahead and I'm moser nefesh, I sacrifice myself to perform mitzvah, that I deserve a reward and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will provide me with a happy ending. The truth of the matter is, the real happy ending, the real sachar, the merit, and the reward for performing mitzvot is the mitzvah itself. It's the fact that look, I gave up so much in order to do for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That satisfaction is the reward that you get in this world. There is no other further reward that you deserve or will get in this world. Because that's not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do. And if a person doesn't believe that, if he goes his whole life saying, if I am moser nefesh, if I sacrifice and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring me, then what's going to happen when he starts sacrificing and he does a lot and HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't bring it? I started keeping Shabbat and I see my parashat going down. Oh, okay. So it wasn't a good investment. Let me stop keeping Shabbat. That is where the flaw is. We hear a lot of times these types of stories. And we have to realize that's not the reward of the mitzvot. That's not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. And the Mishnah Berurah actually seals the deal. He coins it perfectly. Because the last line he says, V'sameach ha'gaon simcha gdola. And this gaon, how did he react to this situation? When he realized he lost hundreds and thousands of dollars, how did he react? He was a simcha gedola. He had a great happiness to him. Why was he happy? He just lost so much money. Sheishlich mineged mamon rav avu tfilat v'tzibur. That he was willing to sacrifice so much money for the sake of praying with a minyan. That made him so happy. Look how much I was able to sacrifice for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That was his reward. Being able to perform the mitzvah and to sacrifice and get reward le'olam haba. Schar mitzvah b'hai al maleka. There's no reward for mitzvot in this world. It's in the next world that we get the reward. The reward in this world is that you had the ability to provide a satisfaction and an enjoyment for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to develop that relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is the reward that you're going to get. Nothing more than that. Don't expect anything else. That is your reward. And when we think like that, Rabotai, when we have that attitude, it changes the whole perspective. When something that we do right ends up wrong in our eyes, we're not going to say we regret it. Because by regretting it, we lost out on the unbelievable opportunity to get that immense reward of being able to perform the mitzvah bisimcha, with celebration, with happiness, and that commitment with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There was once Avrech, was a Talmid Yeshiva. This wasn't long ago, this story. And he decided, he was one of the big yeshivot, the yeshiva of Mir in Israel, many hundreds of students you're talking about. And this one student was a special student, special Talmid Yeshiva. He decided that he wanted to inculcate a stronger dedication to the Torah amongst everybody. He knew there's a major problem that's developing in the world, and that is called the cell phone. And it develops, of course, to everybody, and it includes the yeshiva guys. Now, what's the issue? They're in the Beit Midrash, they're learning Torah, they're in the middle of a Tosafot, in the middle of explaining the Gemara, and all of a sudden, a text message or a phone call. And even if they don't answer, they're going to go ahead and they're checking their phone. They have to click it off, put it back down. They just made a hefsek. They interrupted their learning. Every interruption is not just a small, okay, that was just half a second. It interrupts the whole thing. Okay, where were we? Let's go back. Let's remember. Let's do it. And then you lose the whole concentration. This happens over and over again to hundreds of students in yeshiva. And he says, I want to stop this. I don't want this happening. So some people have the motivation to do it on their own. They don't need other people to tell them. He decided that he's going to help everybody out. He sponsored special lockers. Left them outside the Beit HaMikdash. They were outside. And you could put your phone in there. Each locker was a little cell. You put the phone, you lock it, that no one steals it. And you leave it there. You learn the whole seder. You finish learning. You come back, you take your phone, check the messages and everything else. That way you have 4 hours to learn. 4 hours straight. No interruptions. You're constantly learning. And that's what he decided to do. Baruch Omer ve'oseh. He said and he did. And he got those lockers. One day, one of the students that was Yireh Shamayim and decided to take this upon himself, put his phone into one of those lockers. 1 o'clock comes, he opens up the locker, he sees on the phone 3 missed calls. 3 missed calls on the phone. Okay, what's the number? Same number. He calls it back. Hello. Yeah, this is Bezik. In Israel, they have a company. It's called Bezik. Very big company. And Bezik, yeah. Well, you guys called me 3 times. Why did you call me? Oh, yeah. Well, let me tell you why we called you. We had a promotion. We have this once a year where we call 3 different individuals that win a special raffle of 50,000 shekel. The one who answers the phone gets the 50,000 shekel. So we have you and 2 other people were chosen. Now, the rule is, if you don't answer the phone the first time, we call a second time. If you don't answer the second time, we'll call a third time. After 3 times, part of the rules is you lose the chance, the ability to get the 50,000. That's it. Nigmar Sipur, we called you 3 times. If we moved on to the next person to get the 50,000 shekel, it's about $15,000 in the translation, in the currency exchange. So this man understood that he just lost because, not in spite of, but because he did the mitzvah. He went ahead and he kept his phone there. If he wouldn't have had his phone in there, he would have been with him in the yeshiva. He would have answered the call and made $15,000. Because he was pious and he did above the letter of the law, he ended up losing the $15,000. Now, what was his reaction? He celebrated. He was happy. He was excited. He says, I was able to show such a commitment to the Torah that I was willing to learn and to not have an interruption, even at the expense of $15,000. Now, at the time, he didn't know it. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu waits to see, well, what's his reaction going to be? When he finds out, is he going to be happy or is he going to be miserable? If he's happy, then it shows the amount that he's willing to sacrifice for the mitzvah. Now, look how the whole table is turned. This person, did he really lose $15,000? No, he didn't lose $15,000 because it was never destined to come to him. It was never meant for him to have it. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He sees the person who is willing to commit himself to the seder, and he says, if you're willing to commit yourself so badly, I'm going to throw at you an opportunity of a lifetime, where you give up on $15,000 in order to be able to perform the mitzvah. Now your mitzvah is worth even more than what it was worth before. And trust me, before it was worth plenty, but now it's worth even more. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does. It's not called losing. The sachar, the reward, is the ability to perform the mitzvah. That is the reward a person gets. That simcha, that inspiration of knowing the connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Coming back to Pinchas, we want to explain the original question that we asked. Pinchas ben Elazar, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Bedin hu sheito escharo. He deserves the reward that he's receiving because he sacrificed for Am Yisrael. He was willing to risk his life, put his life on the line for the sake of Jews that were being killed, for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whose name was being desecrated. He deserves reward. Why does he deserve reward? The mitzvah itself is the reward. The answer, the Khatam Sofer says, and I say it in a little bit different terms than the Khatam Sofer, but the idea is the same. The reward a person receives is what? How did we explain? The celebration, the knowledge of the fact, I was able to perform this mitzvah. Can Pinchas celebrate that he did this mitzvah? Some mitzvot have to be done out of anguish and pain. When Yaakov Avinu had to hide Dinah from Esav HaRasha, who wanted to marry Dinah, it says that Yaakov Avinu was punished for hiding her. How dare you hide her? And he was punished so much that it says if you didn't allow her to get married to Esav, beheter, in a permissible fashion, I'm going to get her married off in a non-permissible fashion. And what happened? She was raped by Shchen ben Chamor. That was a direct result of Yaakov Avinu's action, the Midrash tells us. That was directly resulting. And Rabotai, what did Yaakov do wrong? Any worthy father, any normal father, would not want his son or daughter to marry a Rasha. Esav was, according to all accounts, a Rasha. Why should Yaakov marry off his daughter to Esav? And the answer is he shouldn't. He's a loving father, he's a caring father, he doesn't have a responsibility, he's not arachim to go ahead and bring people to do tshuva. His responsibility is to his daughter. Now, he's not supposed to marry her off to Esav. However, how are you going to go ahead and perform this mitzvah? Yaakov Avinu performed it with too much happiness. Yes, I'm going to lock her up. He put the nails in too tight. He wasn't saddened by the fact that I wish I could have that opportunity to give it to Esav. I wish Esav was better, that I could give over my daughter to Esav. That's what he was held to account for. He did not act and perform this mitzvah the way it's supposed to be done. So we see the concept. Some mitzvot you have to perform begrudgingly, without a choice. Pinchas ben Elazar, he wants to kill Zimri ben Salu. Is that something he desires to do? Absolutely not. He has to do it. It's not something that you celebrate. It's not something you take pride in. I have this mitzvah that I killed this Rasha. You got to do it, but you don't take pride in it. It says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Bedin hu she'itos chao. In general, what's the reward for mitzvot in this world? Not that you're going to be compensated. The compensation is the fact that you know, I'm so happy I was able to perform this mitzvah for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Is Pinchas able to be happy? He wished it never happened. He wished he didn't have to be put in that situation. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this mitzvah, Bedin hu she'itos charo. He deserves to be rewarded. Because the mitzvah itself cannot be counted as the reward. You need to give him an external reward for that mitzvah. A few more minutes. I'll say something that's a little bit disconnected to what we just mentioned. But really important for the 3 weeks. Moshe Rabbeinu, towards the end of the parasha, he asks HaKadosh Baruch Hu a request. He says like this, Galui ve'yadua lefanecha, da'ato shel kol echad ve'echad. Moshe Rabbeinu comes pleading with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yifkod Hashem Elohei aruchot lechol basar. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, appoint a leader, a successor for me, for this nation. Because you know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that every single person in Am Yisrael is different. Everybody has their own ideas, their own wants, their own desires, the way they view the world, their conceptualism. And ve'enan domim ze lazeh, they're not similar to each other. Meneh alehem manhig, appoint for them a leader, she'eh sovel kol echad ve'echad lefi da'ato, that he could bear, that he could be patient with each one, crawling into the person's mind, understanding him from the inside, being intimately close with every single Jew. That's the kind of leader Moshe Rabbeinu wanted. Why is this in this week's parasha? Why? Moshe Rabbeinu could have asked this in any one of the parashot. Why in this week's parasha? Commentaries say, one would have thought that Pinchas was the man of the hour. Pinchas ben Elazar. showed such leadership skills, willing to risk his life to save Am Yisrael, to be zealous on account of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, did something that was beyond the realm of normal, super normal. And you would say that Pinchas is the perfect leader. How can you get a better leader than that? A person who takes charge of the game. He doesn't wait for orders to be given. He doesn't wait for things to come to him. He takes the initiative. Wow, Pinchas should be the leader. Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid. And he says, I understand that people probably think that Pinchas should be the leader. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm telling you now, Yifkod Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have to provide a leader for Am Yisrael, Sheyeh sovel, da'atan shel kol beriya v'beriya. You have to appoint a leader that will not be like Pinchas. Pinchas was great. But to be a leader in Am Yisrael, it's not good enough to be kana'i, to be a zealous man. When he sees something that's asur, to attack, and to ridicule, and to degrade. That's not the job of the leader of Am Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu says, you have to be sovel kol echad ve'echad. You have to bear the burden, understand. Am Yisrael, Pinchas is not the type of leader that can lead Am Yisrael as great as Pinchas was. And that's what we see. It's an important lesson for us because as any position of leader, whether it's a leader of Am Yisrael, the entire nation, if it's a leader of a community, if it's a leader in the home, all the leaders have to understand that their followers, children, are all our followers. That they are looking and seeking our leadership. And if we as leaders, we see our child, he does something wrong, and immediately it causes a reaction of criticism, of embarrassing the child, of maybe disciplining sometimes, but over-disciplining the child, then we're not going to be doing a good job as leaders. We have to have the savranut, that patience, that ability to trust. And the Rabbi Leeor Dahan, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, said that one time he was with his father. And he saw that his father was talking to somebody that looked like a simple person. His father calls him over. He says, you know who this man is? We were in the same grade school, from 1st grade to 8th grade. We were together. And then we separated ways. And I became who I became, and he became a farmer. But you should know, he has the most special vineyards in all of Israel. His vineyards, he grows grapes, and his grapes are sold throughout the world. Very, very special. And then he turns to his friend and he says, what's your secret? His friend said, let me tell you the truth. It's a little embarrassing, but I'll tell you the truth. When I go ahead and I plant my grapes, and I see them grow, I give him each one of those clusters, I give him its own attention. I talk to them, I give him attention, I pad them, that's how I treat them. And I think it works. I think the grapes pick up that, they perceive that, and they grow well, and that's why people like my grapes. And the Gemara actually makes this point. We learned this in Masechet Ta'anit, that a person who has faith and trust, even in a chulda ubo, a trust in a pit and in a rat, the rat in the pit will come through for him. And the Gemara says the story, that there was once a chatan, that there was a man, a nice bachelor, who saw that there was a girl drowning in the pit. And she said to him, whoever saves me, please save me, I'll marry you. And he saves her. And the guarantee that was placed was the guarantee who's going to promise that this marriage will end up happening? The chulda or the bull and the bull. The pit and the rat. This man ended up forgetting about the whole deal, the whole arrangement. And he goes ahead, she waits for him, and she has a whole plan of her own. This man gets married, he has children, he has 2 kids. Each child, the first child, died. How did it die? Fell into a pit. Died. Very terrible death. The second child was bitten by a rat and died. Unusual death. The wife picked up on this. She came to her husband, she said, this is not normal. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to show us, he doesn't want us to have children, he would have done it normally. There's something going on. Investigate what's happening. And he remembered that he made a deal. He made a promise. And the guarantors, the person, the 2 edim witnesses that were entrusted, was the chulda and the bo. And they came through. These 2 came through. And he went back and he married her. He married that first woman. And the Gemara says, if a person can have faith in a chulda ubo, and it will come through to him, and save him. Like this woman had faith. And like this farmer had faith in his grapes. How much more so if we are able to have faith in our children? Sometimes we don't trust them enough. We don't show them that we actually feel that their ideas and their opinions are important. We negate what they have to say. We don't show respect and that we appreciate their thoughts and their processes. That's not a question. Why are you making so many mistakes? How come you're not behaving properly? Why are you so lazy? We criticize them. And if we had even an ounce of understanding that a comment and maybe even a word that we say in an angry fashion, in a derogatory fashion to our children, can literally dismantle their whole self-confidence for the rest of their life. Is it worth a lesson to teach them a lesson for the moment and risk potentially causing their whole self-worth for the entirety of their lives to disappear? That's something that we fail to think about, that we fail to stop and realize that we hold the keys to these children, to our grapes' growth and their success. And if we show them confidence and trust in them, then we will imbue them with a sense of responsibility and a sense of capability. That is something that we have to make sure that we do properly. And Rabbi Meir Mazuz Shalita, who is the Rosh Yeshiva of Kisei Rachamim, he says that there was once a person who was what is called the maskil. Basically, he's a religious but not religious. He believes in the intellectualism of the Torah, but he doesn't believe in Yirat Shamayim and fearing God per se. And his son started learning different commentaries. And one of the things he mastered was a sefer called the Shav Shema'ata. The Shav Shema'ata is a very, very complicated book in Torah, goes very deep into topics, and it's not an easy book to master. And this child, from the time he was young, he mastered this whole sefer. It was amazing ability to do. The father hears and knows that his son mastered it, and the moment that he really understands that the son got it, he turns to his son and he says, "You think you know everything?" And he gives him a slap. Because he doesn't want him to have ga'ava. He doesn't want him to have arrogance. That on that very day, the son left the Torah and the mitzvot. That's a very drastic story. Sometimes you don't hear it or you don't see it in that drastic fashion, but that's what happens when we give harsh criticism without thinking. Sometimes it's just by rote. It's like a cause and effect. You do something bad, immediately you have to say something, immediately this. There's no strategy. There's no planning. Is this really getting the point across? Is there a better way of doing this? Can I go ahead, maybe I can figure something out that I don't have to be so confrontational. Maybe we could, do it a different way. And that is a problem when we don't have that mentality. Moshe Rabbeinu tells us that if you want to be a leader, in any capacity of leadership, you have to go ahead and you have to make sure that you show trust, faith, patience, and care for your followers. And if you don't have that, if you're just kanai, let's go like Pinchas, there's something wrong happening here. This is not proper. It's not the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. Let's go, make sure you say those words correctly, every single word. Then we're not going to go ahead and we're not going to develop the kind of leaders of the next generation that need to be. And sometimes people, I'm not blaming them. Sometimes people had bad experiences when they were children. But the opposite, because you had bad experiences, because it was tough, you should learn. And you should say, okay, I don't want that for my children. I don't want that to be for my own kids. And that's a lesson. It might be tough, but it's necessary. It's compelling. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, we need to get Pinchas out of the position of leadership. Somebody else has to be a person that is in touch, understands the way people think, and even if they're very different from each other and very different from him, he's able to go down and to really see and perceive the things that the other people perceive and understand why they see what they see. And if he doesn't understand, he tries to understand. And that's the way of a proper leader and the proper approach. Be'ezrat Hashem, we should be zocheh during these 3 weeks to have the proper ben adam lamakom, ben adam lachavero, and be zocheh to the coming of Mashiach tzidkenu b'mehera v'yamenu v'nomar amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.